The chat will be timed. Welcome to Powerless Penguins United Big Book Study. This week I'm pleased to introduce Mags, who has kindly agreed to share with us. Mags, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. Here we are again. Great to see everybody as usual. The regular faces and those that this might be the first time you've been to this book study. Everybody is more than welcome. And I want to say a huge thank you to Powerless Penguins for the opportunity every Saturday to come and be with you to do this book study. It is the bright spark of my week and gets me into the weekend in a very beautiful way. So thank you for that. So last week, if you haven't got a big book in front of you, then it would probably be helpful that you do. And if you haven't got one, the group will provide you with one. And we're at the bottom of page 23. A little bit of a context as to where we're at. Just a little reminder that we are now in the process of talking about the mental obsession. We begin that process of talking about the mental obsession on page 23, the very page that we are on, and that discussion, instructions that are set out in such clear-cut mastery detail, it goes on to page 43. So the end of the third chapter brings us to the end of discussing the mental obsession. So clearly there's a lot of information for us all to understand. And I'll take you back a couple of lines. We're going to be starting on how true this is. So it's the second from bottom paragraph, but a few lines up for that. It talks about the fact that there is the obsession, and we covered this last week. I was going to circle that word for obsession to remind you that this is what we're talking about here. And the only way that I can describe this obsession is that it is this preoccupation with this totally and utterly unreasonable idea that I can pick up one drink or I can use for one time and I'm going to be okay. Now we know from the previous paragraph on page 21 where we get the definition of a real alcoholic, that being someone who has lost all control of their drinking at some point in their drinking career. I'm not a moderate drinker or user. I'm not a heavy drinker or user. I am a real alcoholic as per the definition on page 21. And I established the fact that I was a real alcoholic by getting a sponsor and working the steps as set out in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's how I was able to self-diagnose. It's not up to anybody in this room or my sponsor to tell me that they think I am an alcoholic. It's up to me to diagnose myself by simply showing up and turning the pages and asking through this step one process, is this me? Is this me? Is this me? Is this me? Okay, so when I am not drinking or using, I'm thinking about drinking or using. That's the mental obsession. Totally and utterly preoccupied with an unreasonable idea that it's okay for me to pick up, because it's not. And as we go through the next few pages, it tells us and emphasizes even more that we have no control. We know at this point we also have no power. Our willpower is not enough. We haven't got enough strength of ourselves. So into the paragraph, how true this is, and in relation to the fact that they suspect that they're already down for the count. How true this is. Do you realise? In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal. Because we are. In relation to alcohol, it's a really normal substance that I react totally and utterly abnormally to. This illness centred in my mind. But everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer, me, will arouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will. That happened with everybody around me. They desperately wanted me to be normal. They desperately wanted me to react normally. They desperately wanted me to behave around alcohol like they did. But I couldn't, because I'm not the same as them. So I had to set aside every single thing I thought I knew, as per the set aside prayer, when I had a sponsor, when I came into the fellowship, in order to have this new experience with God. Now, if you're sitting in this room or listening to this recording and you're thinking the God thing's all whiffle waffle, okay. But it won't be. By the time you get to the point of getting a sponsor and work the steps, as set out in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, you will find the power that is greater than you. So set aside every single thing you think you know about this God being whiffle waffle and just keep showing up and doing what you need to do with your sponsor. Don't know where I got that word whiffle waffle from. That's just weird. I've never used that phrase before in my life. This is what the penguins have done to me. Anyway. So to assert his power of will, there is no willpower. I haven't got enough strength, as I said. Because here's the thing, the tragic truth is that if the man be a real alcoholic, as per the definition set out on page 21, I will keep on referring to that so you know exactly where you can find it, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost control. There's that word again. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, you might think you're a different alcoholic or user to somebody else in the room. Set that all aside too, because at a certain point, and it's not just a certain point in that, look, it might happen here and it might happen there, you know, at a certain point. What they're saying here, it's at a definite point, at some point in your drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. And we go on to talk about the desire a little bit later on in the book. But right now, keep in mind the control. Keep in mind the obsession, the mental obsession. The tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected. Now, in my experience, in the end, the progression of my illness, because it is an illness, and we know that from page 18 of the book, that it is an illness. It's the same as cancer. It needs a treatment. It needs a prescription to help us overcome it. And that's what the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous gives us. As we are in, there is a solution. It's going to talk to us about what the solution is. In the end, the progression of my illness had me so far in its grip, even though I had a desperate desire to stop. I couldn't do it by myself. And I now understand the reason why. And it goes on to tell us that in the next couple of pages. Italicized paragraph next, we know that this is exceptionally important. They took the time to change the print run to be able to get the blocks to put these words into italics. It wasn't, you heard me say this a couple of weeks ago, and it might sound so silly to emphasize this, but they weren't working off computers back in the day. They had to take the time and effort to change the print run because they were absolutely definite that they wanted to show us how important the italicized words were and what they mean to you. Okay? So anywhere where it's italicized, it's a really emphasized point that they wish to make to us. Of course, all of the words are important, but these are emphasized. Please listen. And if you need to highlight or do whatever you want to do with it, to asterisk it or do whatever you want to do so it even stands out even further, then do what you got to do. It's your book. It's your program. It's your life. So do whatever you've got to do to get these things to jump out at you. This is powerful. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. So there's another word, choice. So what they're now telling us over the course of these last couple of pages is, in totality, for you, you have no power over alcohol. You have no choice over alcohol. You have no control over alcohol. And it's all three. Now, this comes with a little caveat from my perspective because I identify as an alcoholic. Drugs are part of my story. If you're an addict and alcohol isn't part of your problem, then think about the addiction that you have with regards to your using of drugs. Is this you? Is this you? Is this you? Okay. So don't start to separate yourself because I keep using the word alcohol. Don't let that delusion come in. Set aside every single thing you think you know to have this new experience with God. But we have no power, no choice, and no control. And it's all three. It's really important that I emphasize that. So I came into the rooms to prove to people that I wasn't an alcoholic, and I did everything in my power, my willpower, to control my drinking. But I still had no choice. I thought I could choose the drinks to be able to control my drinking, but I still had no power. It's all three. You can't negate one by using the other. It's as simple as that. You might need to have a little think about that, or maybe listen again to what that means, but it's all three. Your mind, we're in the mental obsession, will try to confuse you, will try to convince you. Your ego will try to convince you it's okay. I'll just do a little bit of this. I'll just change my drinking or the time of day that I drink. You have no choice in any of it. I think I'm making my point. So it's one to ponder. Think about those times where you were trying to control. Think about those times where you tried to choose the amount you used, what you used, how you used, when you used, who you were with when you used it. Your willpower, your strength was still never able to stop. And they go on to emphasize again the almost certain, definite consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer. Even a glass of beer. Do not crowd into the mind to deter us. This illness centers in our mind. It goes back to those points from the doctor's opinion that we read weeks ago. You know, we pick up that first drink, we pick up that first whatever to use in order to get the sense of ease and comfort. But it was only a sense. It was never real. So we kept on picking up and using to get the sense of ease and comfort. It was never real. So the vicious cycle continued because once we're picking up that first drink, we're setting off this allergy, which then manifests itself in the phenomenon of craving, and that's when we need more and more and more. They told me in the rooms here where I live, don't pick up the first drink. I didn't know what that meant. They didn't explain to me until I got my sponsor. They didn't explain to me that it's the first drink that was the problem. Because it's the thing, first use, it's the thing that sets off my allergy with regards to alcohol that manifests itself in this phenomenon of craving. I'm repeating myself a little bit because there's a lot of information to take in here. So if these thoughts occur, I'm emphasizing the word thoughts. We're thinking again here, it's the mental obsession. This is all about our mind. You may be sitting here and might not have picked up a drink or might not have used for a period of time. But the likelihood is that you're still thinking about it. That's the mental obsession. Once we stop, we don't have the allergy. We're not putting it into our system. So there's no allergy there. You're not suffering from the allergy when you're not putting anything into it. But what you do have is the mental obsession if you're still thinking about it. And right now, if you're here in the book, you ain't got a mental defense against that first drink. What we have to get you is the mental defense against the first drink. You can't do that by yourself. So if these thoughts occur, they are hazy and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. This time it's going to be different. This time I'm not going to drink as much. Well, that's nonsense because you've got no choice and you've got no power. You can't control it. It tells us later on in step 1 that, well, I'm not going to go there. We're going to grow where we're planted. But the reality of it is we can't handle ourselves like other people. If you be a real alcoholic, as per the definition on 21, you are not like other people. I'm different from my brother and sister when it comes to my reaction to this. And here's the thing, there is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. I know not to put my hand on a hot stove. But with the alcohol, I'll just keep trying. It's not going to burn me this time. I'll just sort it out. I'll just make the choice. No, you haven't got the choice. It's not the same. And how many times have you said this to yourself in the room? And especially when you're working with sponsees or the newcomer in the room, the alcoholic may say to himself in the most casual way, just like I've said, I jumped ahead, I forgot this line was in there, won't burn me this time. So here's how. I'm just going to show you how it won't burn me this time. I'm just going to do the same thing again in control and choose a different way of doing this. But we still have no choice. Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. I used to have those times where I was like, whatever, I'm just doing it anyway. I'm an alcoholic. I don't need to come into the rooms to find out why I drank. As it says in the doctor's opinion, I drank because I liked the effect it had on me. That's it. I don't need to come into the rooms to find out I drank because my teacher took my pencil off me when I was in, class 5 in 1972, or my boyfriend dropped me when I was 13 going into, high school, or my boss didn't like me in 1982 because they didn't promote me. Whatever, that's not the reason why I drank. The reason why I drank is because I liked the effect that it had on me. Now, there's a lot of other theories with regards to why we drink, and we get into all of that stuff later on. I'm not getting into any windy controversy about anything like that. But what this program of action and this program of recovery has taught me is the impact that alcohol has on me physically, like we learned about in the doctor's opinion, and mentally now as we go through the rest of these pages. Think about this. Is this you? How often have some of us begun to drink in this nonchalant way, and after the third or fourth, pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, for God's sake, how did I ever get started again? I didn't ever go out for 3 or 4. Genuinely, and I was at a meeting yesterday talking about this, genuinely. This is the delusion of my mind, the illusion of my mind when it comes to my addiction. I genuinely only ever went out for 2 drinks. Isn't that crazy? I only ever went out for 2 drinks, and then after 2 bottles of wine or whatever as it progressed, I was banging on the bar, waking up the next morning thinking, how has that happened again? I only went out for 2 drinks. And here I am with 6 bottles lying around me and food that I can't even remember buying, blacked out, still dressed from the night before, having to get up and get ready for work again. I only went out for 2 drinks. Craziness, insanity. And we come on to talk about that as we go through the rest of the pages. Here we are, only to have that thought supplanted by, well, I'll stop with the 6th drink. What's the use anyhow? Is that you? Nods on the screen. It's a brilliant thing that you're nodding, yes, this is me. It's a brilliant thing that you're saying, do you know what? Yeah, I can identify with what Max is saying. You might not identify with where I live, what I drink, how I drink, my lifestyle, whatever. I don't identify hardly with anybody in the room because my journey is unique and exceptional to me. But the reality of it is we have the same common peril and we're going to be using the same common solution as we talked about on page 17 when we started. There is a solution. So if you're nodding to say, yeah, this is me, happy days. Keep on going. Keep on showing up. Keep on turning the pages with your sponsor because you're going to get more nods and more yeses. And the aggregate of all of those yeses adds up to a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps. It's that simple. When this sort of thinking, I'd be circling that little word to remind me, the mental obsession, our illness centers in our mind. When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, now these tendencies are nothing but the allergy and the mental obsession. Any other tendencies that people talk about, like I have the tendency to, take the car and think I'm going to drink a non-alcoholic beer and then come home again and actually end up drinking alcoholically anyway. I have the tendency just to, not eat before I go out. I have the tendency to behave like the Jekyll and Hyde story that we read last week. Those tendencies don't make you an alcoholic. What makes you an alcoholic is the physical allergy and the mental obsession. The behaviors in the Jekyll and Hyde story are not what makes you an alcoholic. It's the physical allergy and the mental obsession. You might have those behaviors from that story. You might be able to identify with those behaviors in that story. And even if you don't use or have those behaviors, do you still have the physical allergy and the mental obsession? This is what you're trying to get to, because that's the crux of your problem. It doesn't matter whether I lost my driving license, didn't lose my driving license. That's not what makes me an alcoholic. Those were the consequences of my drinking. It doesn't matter the consequences that got you here. It's whether you have the allergy or the mental obsession. That's why we've got to set aside every single thing we think we know. If we think we're different from everybody in this room because those behaviors, the consequences didn't happen, it still doesn't emphasize the fact that you have to work out the mental obsession and the physical allergy. Is this you? So if you have those alcoholic tendencies of the physical allergy and the mental obsession, he's probably placed himself beyond human aid. Like we found out on page 18, that little paragraph, the people that can't help us, the psychiatrists, the doctors, the counsellors, the rehab facilities, the addiction services, they can give us a platform from which we can start to begin to work, but they cannot solve our problem by itself. Rehab is part of my journey, 100% did it help me, but as soon as I got out of the rehab, I had to do this. I had to have a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps. I am beyond human aid. And unless locked up, like in a rehab for 3.5 months, may die or go permanently insane. It's like the doctor says in the doctor's opinion. The alcoholic, our message, the addict, the message that we have to give to these people, to me, when I first came into the rooms, was it had to have depth and weight. The frothy emotional appeal did not suffice. Again, from the doctor's opinion. No amount of crying and screaming and all of that from my younger sister that I talked about last week was going to enable me to have the power to stop. The depth of weight that my sponsor articulated to me from the outset is, Mags, you're going to die. Mags, this is a progressive illness and it's going to take you down. And in the end, I had such a desperate desire to stop, and yet I couldn't by myself. I thought I was going insane. So that little line that they're saying there, yeah, I didn't think I'd get locked up, but I did. And the reason why I got locked up for 3.5 months is because I literally was a few days away from my own funeral. And I only knew that because my sponsor told me, because I was oblivious to all of that. And ultimately, had I not stopped, I would have gone insane. And I would have made, potentially, the supreme sacrifice. Again, like it talks about in the doctor's opinion. I was drinking to live and drinking to die. Insanity. But the insanity that they're going to teach us about here in this chapter is the insanity of picking up the first drink. Because by this stage, you already know to pick up the first drink is not the solution. To pick up the first drink is to set off the allergy which manifests itself in the phenomenon of craving, which makes us want more. So how do we then sort the mental obsession? Well, this is what they're going to go on and tell us. And to be locked up, to die, or go permanently insane, this next line, these stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. I can confirm, absolutely, these are stark and ugly facts, but they are the reality of what my life was and could have been. However, but for the grace of God, listen to that. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. Is this you? So many want to stop, but cannot. You cannot do this by yourself. I so desperately wanted to stop, and I couldn't. I was drinking and using against my own will. I remember standing in my kitchen, 9:30 in the morning, raising a glass of wine to my mouth, and as it got to my mouth, saying out loud, I do not want to do this. And it happened anyway. That is the reality of what we're dealing with. Someone provided me with something else. I do not want to do this. Is that you? We're not on the screen. And if this is you, great. If this is you, this is good. If this is you, there is a solution. That very next line. There is a solution. Italicized. Important. They wish to emphasize. This is for you. Page 25. Don't ever forget this page. This is a gem of all gems. There is a solution. But here's the thing. They give us a little caveat here. Almost none of us liked the self-searching. So the people in this book are letting us know they didn't like doing this stuff. Almost none of us liked the self-searching. They didn't like step 4. They didn't want to do step 4 either. They didn't like the self-searching. Let me tell you, I did not like the self-searching. I didn't like doing any of this program. But the reality of it is, every time I showed up with a sponsor, I didn't even realize it was happening to me. I just kept showing up and turning the pages. He just kept showing up and turning the pages. And somehow or other, by just showing up and turning the pages, he took my hand and put my hand in the hand of the God of my understanding. I didn't even realize it was happening to me. That's how simple this is. If you just show up with a sponsor and keep on turning the pages. So almost none of us like the self-searching. They didn't like doing their step 4. The leveling of our pride. They didn't like doing step 5 either. The confession of shortcomings. They didn't like doing 6 or 7 either. They're the same as us. They didn't like doing any of that, but this process requires these steps for its successful consummation. We have to do this thing. We have to complete these steps. Step 12, in and of itself, gives the instructions. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps, nothing else. We try to carry this message and practice these principles in all of our affairs. So the reality of it is, people say this to me all the time. Mags, I want what you have. Do you? What is it you think that I have? I don't know what it is that you're looking at or hearing or whatever, but if you think that you want what I have, help me understand what that is. But if you want what I have, you've got to do what I do. It's that simple. And all I've done, really, you want what I have? All I've done is had a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps, and I didn't even realize it was happening to me. But I showed up. I didn't question a single solitary thing. I set aside every single thing I think I know. I shut this big gob of mind that I had. I was quiet for an hour every week. I listened to what my sponsor had to say. Half the times I didn't understand what he was telling me. Half the times I didn't want to do what he told me to do, but I did it anyway. And here I am. Because here's the thing, what they're telling us, the people that wrote this book, although they didn't like doing any of that, but we saw that it really worked in others. And we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life. Futility meaning pointlessness of life. Is this true? The hopelessness of where you're living, the pointlessness of where you're living. They saw all of this stuff working in other people, and at some point they thought, oh my God, like I did, this is ridiculous. This is just pointless. So this hopeless and futility of life as we had been living it. When therefore we were approached, there's that beautiful word again, by a recovered alcoholic addict, by those in whom the problem had been solved, past tense, history, nowhere to be seen. There was nothing left. See how precise these words are? There was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools that are laid at our feet. Like, that is just incredible. If you're sitting here and you're in a hopeless state of mind and body, and your life is feeling really, really pointless for you, what they're saying is that we've got this simple kit of spiritual tools that's laid at our feet. Now, I hear all sorts of everything about what people say, their simple, toolkit that is laid at their feet. The reality of this simple toolkit is that circle and triangle on the first page. The 12 steps for you, your own recovery. The 12 traditions for the group, the unity. The 12 concepts of world service for your spirituality. Mind, body, spirit. Those 36 spiritual principles. Those 3 legacies. That triangle in the front cover page, surrounded by that circle, means that we become complete. And I have to be right in the center of that triangle with those 36 spiritual principles, which this program of recovery and this program of action give me. That is the spiritual toolkit that is laid at my feet. And it's laid at my feet because I have to bend down and make the effort and take the action to pick it up, to put it on the table in front of me, to see what tool it is that I need to use in any given day. It's the 36 spiritual principles. Unity, recovery, service. That is the spiritual toolkit that is laid at my feet. If anybody tells you that it's something else, they're not telling you what Alcoholics Anonymous is. They're not telling you the solution in the way that it is set out in masterly detail in this book. We need to stop confusing the newcomer about what the spiritual toolkit is that is laid at their feet. It is this simple. Now, before the AA and the big book police or CA police come in and start to say, oh, Max is saying it's not right. You always know I like to refer to this as well. I know that later on in the book they tell us to see where other spiritual people were right. They tell us to see where other medical people are right. 100%. Let's do that. Let's read all of these spiritual books. Let's get into all of these spiritual practices. 100%. But before you do that, you need to understand this spiritual toolkit. Otherwise, you're going to go down a rabbit hole and end up, I don't know where, trying to do a gazillion other things, praying on a mountain with 450,000 other individuals, whilst we're all sitting in a meeting every Saturday morning learning how to do this. Do this. Have a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps, and all your problems will be solved, like it says in this paragraph. It's that simple, really. And we complicate the back end out of it for ourselves and for the newcomer when they come into the room. If we stick to the masterly clear-cut directions, don't give our own opinion, don't give our own judgment. I'm telling you now, we build an army of recovered alcoholics and addicts across this world. The foreword to the second edition tells us that. Intensive work, one alcoholic with another, ensures permanent recovery. Not just my own, but across the world. We're building an army, people. And get this. Remember, I said it a couple of minutes ago. Remember page 25. This paragraph and the next, phenomenal. The great fact, and a fact is something that is known to be true, is just this, and nothing less. Precision in those words again, people. And nothing less. And I can tell you now that this is what has happened in my life, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps. But what is being described here is the experience of the first 100. The great fact is just this, and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences, which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. What a promise is that? The central fact known to be true of our lives today, and I know this to be true because it has happened to me, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps, that the central fact of our lives in full-blown recovery is that today, the absolute certainty that our Creator, another word for God, choose whatever word for God that you want, that our Creator has entered into our hearts. There's that word again. That our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. My power, my strength, my Creator, my spirit of the universe, my whatever I call it in any given day, I choose to call it God just because it's easier, 100% lives in my heart to the extent that I can feel it. I can feel it. I'm going to learn how to as we go through the next lot of pages. And it is miraculous. You know, a miracle, it gets thrown about the rooms all the time, but it's true. A miracle is just a change in perception. A miracle is a change in how I see things. A miracle is a change in my mind. I have miracles all through my day. It's a miracle that I'm sitting here with you on a Saturday morning at this time. It's a miracle that I've been able to do my washing before I even got on to a meeting. People wouldn't see that as a miracle. Well, that's not a miracle because nothing really big has happened there. She's just got up in the morning and done her washing. No, it's a miracle because my change in perception has happened. My change in attitude has happened. God has given me a life where I am so blinded by the glimmers of miracles all the time because my mind has been rewired through this process. You know? That's the reality. That's the great fact, the great reality that I experience. Because here's the thing. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do for ourselves. I could never do this by myself. I'm not here with you every Saturday morning of myself. Kate in Sydney even knows that. I'm not here of myself. There's something else working in and through me that enables me to accomplish these things that I cannot do for myself. I've got no power, no choice, no control over drink, alcohol, whatever, any sort of substance. There's something else doing something for me and I didn't even realize it was happening. And get this, when a revolution happens in the country, a revolution, there's noise, there's disruption, there's all sorts of everything goes on. It's not a smooth process. They don't just rock up with each other and go, hey, do you fancy a revolution? Let me take you by the hand and show you. No, it's disturbing, it's noisy, it's all of that. And when this revolutionary change happened in my whole attitude, it felt a little bit choppy. It felt uncomfortable. I got a little bit of disturbance along the way. But all my sponsor did was tell me to keep showing up, turning the pages, take the action, do the work, don't ask any questions, set aside every single thing you think you know, and the revolution took place. This power commenced to accomplish the things that I could never do by myself. I wasn't even able to set aside every single thing I thought I knew by myself. I had to ask God for that too, in order to have the new experience with this power that I didn't even know existed. Because here's the reality, and I'm going to finish on this paragraph. Ask yourself, is this you? And you might be off alcohol and drugs for a period of time, but if you're sitting in this room and you're still thinking that your life is pretty futile, pointless, and you're feeling a sense of hopelessness, ask yourself, is this you? Because sometimes it doesn't matter how far away you are from the drink and the drugs. If you're not doing this program in your daily reprieve every single day, you might still, as per the instructions, daily reprieve every single day. If you're not doing that, you still might feel a little bit hopeless and a bit of pointlessness, if not totally futile, in your entire life. Get honest with yourself. The willingness, the honesty, the open-mindedness we're going to talk about next week are going to be completely and utterly indispensable for the rest of your life. So if you're as seriously alcoholic as we were, past tense, if you can identify with what these people are saying, and even if you can't identify with what I'm saying and you're asking yourself, is this you, is this you, is this you? If you're as seriously alcoholic as we were, they're telling us, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. There is no middle of the road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible. That line is a little nod to the fact of the unmanageability of your life. That line is a little nod to the second half of the first step. So we're understanding the first half of the first step, that we're powerless over alcohol physically and mentally. After the dash, our lives have become unmanageable. Life was becoming impossible. You might be sitting here with complete and utter unmanageability in your life. And if we passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, because there is no human aid, we had but two alternatives. So you've got no power, no choice, no control over any of the substance that you're using, but you still have two alternatives. Isn't that mega? No power, no choice, no control, but you still have two alternatives at this point. And here they are. One, go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of the intolerable situation as best you can. That's one alternative. How do you fancy that? Keep on blotting out the consciousness because you are aware of it, but blot it out. The consciousness of the intolerable situation as best you could, the situation that you find yourself sitting in now, or the other alternative, to accept spiritual help. And I'm going to leave you to ponder that for the next week before we get into the rest of the solution. Are you happy to continue to blot out the consciousness of your intolerable situation? Or accept the spiritual help? I'll leave it at that, Steph. Thank you so much.